October 1993, in the small city of Shakopee, Minnesota, where autumn skies were often crystal clear and maple leaves blanketed the schoolyards, an 8-year-old girl named Madeline Scott walked into Jackson Elementary School in a bright yellow dress and freshly curled hair. It was school picture day. She was quiet, shy, but excited. Her mother had told her that morning, "Smile big, Maddie. I'm putting that photo up in the living room." By 2:15 p.m. that day, Madeline had vanished without a trace. Local police locked down the entire school within an hour. The search went on for weeks, with K-9 units, mounted patrols, and hundreds of volunteers combing through every room in the school, every tree behind the playground, every path in the woods. But there was no body, no evidence. Not a single witness saw Madeline leave. The case went cold and became one of the most haunting and unresolved child disappearances in Minnesota history. 30 years later, in November 2023, a retired school photographer named Richard Voss stumbled upon an old roll of Kodak Gold 200 film in the darkroom of his Bloomington basement. The film had never been developed, forgotten since the fall of 1993. When he processed it, student portraits began to appear, toothless grins, twins in matching sweaters, and then, on the very last frame, a young girl with wide eyes, pale face, seated in a yellow dress with daisy buttons. Madeline Scott. But what made Richard drop the tray of chemicals wasn't just the girl's terrified expression. It was the hand emerging from the shadows behind her, resting on her shoulder. A hand that didn't belong to the photographer, nor the teacher, nor the assistant, nor anyone accounted for on that day's schedule. A hand burned long ago, with waxy, scarred skin stretched tight and glossy. The case was reopened, and what investigators would uncover next would change everything the town of Shakopee thought they had buried. The morning of October 5, 1993, the school bell rang sharply at 8 a.m. at Jackson Elementary School in Shakopee, Minnesota. The sky was clear and quiet, and the maple trees lining the front lawn had begun to turn fiery shades of red and orange, their leaves fluttering gently in the wind. Second graders bustled through the hallways, backpacks too big for their frames, sneakers squeaking against the tile floors. Inside Room 2B, the energy was electric. It was school picture day, an event that brought out both excitement and jitters in the kids. Shirts were buttoned up to the neck, skirts were freshly ironed, headbands and barrettes pulled tight across small brows. Mrs. Cynthia Gellner, now in her third year teaching, tried to maintain order, but the giddy atmosphere of picture day was impossible to fully contain. In the corner of the room, at desk number 6, sat Madeline Scott. Brown hair down to her shoulders, dressed in the yellow dress her mother had hand-sewn 2 weeks earlier, complete with tiny daisy buttons. She wore no jacket, carried no lunchbox. Her small hands were folded neatly in her lap, eyes fixed on the clock above the chalkboard as if she were counting every second. Ms. Gellner noticed. "Madeline, you doing all right?" she asked softly. Madeline nodded, but didn't smile. Her desk was tidy, a notebook, a plastic box of crayons, but missing her usual snacks or drink. She hadn't joined the morning circle on the rug either. Yet, on the attendance sheet, her name had already been marked as present by someone else. At 9 to 12 a.m., the assistant photographer knocked on the classroom door. "2B, you're up." Ms. Gellner clapped twice. "Line up alphabetically, please. Let's go quietly." The children groaned but obeyed, trailing down the hall to the multi-purpose room that had been transformed into a makeshift photo studio. Richard Voss, 62 years old, a seasoned school photographer, was adjusting the lighting umbrella and his Canon AE1 tripod. He had shot portraits for over 30 schools in Scott County. Jackson Elementary was the second stop that week. "Class 2B, let's get those smiles ready," he called out, voice raspy but warm. Madeline was third in line. The assistant checked her name. "Madeline Scott, yellow dress, second grade." She stepped onto the marked tape square on the floor and sat straight. Richard peered through the viewfinder. Chin down. Little smile. Click. Flash. Madeline didn't smile. Her eyes were wide, her shoulders tight. Something about her look made Richard pause. He snapped 2 more shots. "We'll use the second one," he muttered. She stepped off the mark, and then she was gone. At 11:38 a.m., the recess bell rang. Half the class was still at lunch, the other half on the playground. But Madeline was nowhere. Ms. Gellner began asking, "Has anyone seen Madeline since pictures?" The responses came hesitantly. No one remembered seeing her. Some thought maybe she'd gone to the nurse. Some guessed she went home. But no one had actually seen her leave. At 12:15 p.m., the front office confirmed. Madeline Scott was not on school grounds. A full internal search began. Every classroom, restroom, storage closet, even the reading tent in the library and the AV cage in the basement were checked. At 1:15 p.m., her mother, Ann Scott, arrived in her nursing scrubs, panic in her eyes. By 2:00 p.m., the local police had sealed off all exits. The school went into partial lockdown. At 4:45 p.m., with the sun beginning to dip behind the autumn trees, Madeline Scott was officially declared missing. November 2023, 3 decades after Madeline disappeared, Richard Voss, the man who had photographed her that morning, stood alone in the basement of his Bloomington, Minnesota home. His wife had passed away just weeks earlier after a stroke. The basement, once his makeshift darkroom, now sat in silence, thick with dust and the sharp smell of expired chemicals. He hadn't touched it in over 15 years. But that morning, while cleaning to reclaim some sense of purpose, he opened an old wooden box labeled in fading silver marker, "Jackson School, 1993. Inside, he found a single roll of Kodak Gold 200, undeveloped, still sealed in its plastic canister. He nearly tossed it, but instinct stopped him. His hands, trembling more from age than nerves, loaded the film into the tank. As the developer worked and the negatives emerged, so did the faces. Grinning boys missing teeth, twin girls in matching striped sweaters, and then frame 24. Richard froze. It was the final image on the roll. A little girl in a yellow dress, sitting upright, hair curled, eyes wide, not looking at the photographer, but just past the lens. As if she were staring at something, or someone, standing behind the camera. The longer he looked, the more unsettled he became. Just over her left shoulder, buried in the shadows of the wrinkled gray backdrop, was a hand. Resting gently, almost protectively. But not quite right. The thumb and index finger bore burn scars, shiny and wax-like, the skin taut as if melted years ago. There was no visible shirt cuff, no sleeve, just a hand emerging from somewhere unseen. Richard stepped back, cold sweat forming on his neck. That was not his hand. It couldn't have been his assistant's either. Ed had called in sick that morning. Richard had shot alone. That night, unable to sleep, he called the Shakopee Police Department tip line. His voice was hoarse and brittle as he left a message around midnight. "I developed an old roll of school portraits. It's Madeline. And someone else is in the frame. I don't remember taking it, but that's my camera, my lighting, my setup. It had to be me." The next morning, inside a secured conference room at Shakopee PD, Detective Amy Warnke, now head of the department's cold case unit, sat across from Richard. Between them lay a high-resolution print of the photo, frame 24. Amy stared at it without blinking. She had been a third grader when Madeline vanished. She'd attended Jackson Elementary herself, her classroom just down the hallway from room 2B. She still remembered the lockdown, the crying teachers, the empty lunch table, but she had never seen this photo. No one had. Madeline sat upright in the image, her mouth slightly open, eyes fixed with something beyond fear, something more like realization, and that hand, burned, scarred, emerging from shadow, unaccounted for, unclaimed. "I don't remember taking it," Richard said quietly. "But if it exists, I must have." Amy didn't look up. Do you remember anyone unusual near the setup that day? Richard hesitated. There might have been a man. Thin, late 40s. Stood near the door for a while. Didn't speak. I assumed he was a parent, but I was behind schedule. I didn't think much of it. You didn't question it? It's a school, he said. People come and go. Amy nodded grimly and zoomed in on the image. Forensics had already analyzed the hand. Severe burn scarring, likely from the 1970s or early 1980s. No one on the official staff matched. But someone else had been there. Written in pencil on a 1993 staff sign-in sheet found deep in the school archives. Mr. Gellner, sub-custodian, temp agency. A name that didn't appear in any payroll record, no contract, no background check, no trace in the district system. A ghost entry. Someone had written him in. 2:45 p.m. November the 12th, 2023. Inside the evidence wing of the Shakopee Police Department, Detective Amy Warnke stood in front of a large bulletin board. At the center was an enlarged print of Frame 24, the image of Madeline Scott in her yellow dress, eyes wide open, mouth slightly parted, just over her left shoulder. A burned hand. The photograph, unseen by anyone for 3 decades, now held the power to reopen a case the town had long buried. The image had been enhanced for brightness and contrast, enlarged to reveal every detail. And now, not only were the burn scars visible, but something else. A slight curvature along the edge of the wrinkled gray backdrop. It had been pulled aside, and behind it, in the shadows, was the faint suggestion of a door frame. But the current blueprints of Jackson Elementary, now converted into the Shakopee Community Center in 2004, showed nothing at that spot, just a flat wall. Amy sensed something was wrong. She requested access to the original architectural plans, archived before 1995. In those older schematics, she found a small note in the margins. Closet 2A, janitorial storage, sealed 1997. It was a narrow custodial closet tucked behind the stage of the multi-purpose room, the same space used for the school's photo day in 1993. Within the hour, a search warrant was approved. By 5:30 p.m., a forensic team arrived at the Shakopee Community Center. The multi-purpose room had since been remodeled into a dance studio, its walls now covered in floor-to-ceiling mirrors. But the structure remained largely the same. When they pulled down the mirrored panels, the outline of a sealed door became clear. Beneath layers of paint, behind plaster and studs, lay a crude frame. Once a door, now hidden. "Cut it," Amy instructed. A rotary saw buzzed to life. White dust swirled through the air. After 20 minutes, the panel collapsed inward with a heavy thud. Behind it, a narrow void, about 4 feet wide, 8 feet deep, a forgotten janitor's closet. Inside, a cracked mop handle, 2 decaying plastic buckets, a calendar still stuck to the wall with old tape, curling at the edges like shed skin. October 1993. The 5th was circled in red ink. At the bottom margin of the calendar, written in tight, slanted cursive, C.R. Gellner. Amy's breath caught. Gellner! She immediately reopened the district personnel files. Cynthia Ruth Gellner, 2nd grade teacher, classroom 2B. Never married, no children, lifelong resident of Shakopee. But her records showed no mention of any siblings, no relatives on file, no shared addresses. Amy called Officer Lisa Navarro, a former colleague assisting remotely with federal record access. "Run everything you can on Cynthia Gellner," Amy said. "Focus on siblings, prior co-residency, especially anyone with a sealed juvenile record." 20 minutes later, Lisa called back. Her voice was low. "I found something. Cynthia had an older brother, Paul Gellner, born 1954, arrested in 1982 in Duluth for attempted abduction of a minor. Charges were dropped when the child refused to testify. But it's him, Amy. He used the alias Blaine Carter on multiple job applications in the early 90s, including one with a custodial temp agency assigned to Shakopee schools. Amy tightened her grip on the file. Where is he now? No records after 2006, Lisa replied. Last known location was a hunting cabin near the edge of Itasca State Forest. Madeline Scott was never seen again after picture day. But perhaps, just perhaps, she never left the school building at all. The morning of November 13, 2023, the multi-purpose room at the Shakopee Community Center was sealed off completely. Beneath the harsh glow of portable LED floodlights, the forensic team moved silently, measuring every inch of the space. The very room where second graders once smiled for their school portraits and where Madeline Scott was last seen alive. Behind the false wall, what had once been labeled Closet 2A, there was no ventilation, no windows, no wiring, just musty stains on cracked plaster and flaking drywall warped by decades of moisture. But along the rear wall, a forensic tech noticed something strange. A shallow depression, rectangular in shape, roughly the size of a human body. When tapped, it echoed, hollow, unlike the rest of the room. Amy ordered a ground-penetrating radar scan that afternoon. The results confirmed it. A hidden void, roughly 6 feet long, 10 feet wide, wedged between two structural support beams. A space that didn't appear on any building plans from 1993. Amy stared at the radar image in silence, then nodded. Open it. Two officers began chiseling through the back wall of the closet. The concrete gave way slowly, in clumps. Dust hung in the air like smoke. As the final slab dropped forward, a foul odor hit them. Damp insulation, aged plastic, and something scorched. One tech gagged. Another leaned in, flashlight sweeping the void. "Ma'am, you're going to want to see this." The cavity was barely large enough for a person to sit or lie down. No bed, no furniture. Just a pink blanket wadded in the corner, and a disposable camera sealed inside a Ziploc bag. On the bag, written in black marker, "Property of Princess, do not touch." Amy swallowed. "Bag it. Take it to the lab." As the officer reached in to retrieve the camera, his flashlight swept across the foam-lined wall. That's when he saw them. Scratched words, over and over again, dug into the insulation by a fingernail. Just one word. Help. By late evening, the first dozen photos from the roll had been developed in the PD's photo lab. Every single frame featured the same child. A girl, thin, eyes swollen, dressed in a yellow dress. Madeline Scott. She was alive in the images. Red-rimmed eyes. Lips pressed together. In one photo, she sat cross-legged, holding a plastic cup with a juice box straw. In another, she curled under the pink blanket, staring directly at the lens. By frame 19, a second presence appeared. A hand, the burned hand, the same one from the school portrait, entered the frame, holding a toy tiara. In the next photo, Madeline was wearing it. She didn't smile, didn't resist. She simply sat still. In frame 21, a faint reflection appeared in a turned-off television behind her, the shadowed silhouette of a man. His features blurred, but the posture, the crouch, the position, they matched the description of Paul Gellner. Then came frame 24, not the one Richard had taken, one Madeline had taken herself. She held the camera out at arm's length. Her face was pale, blank. A soft light from above diffused across her cheeks. In her lap, a folded card, stained faintly red. Forensics confirmed it was blood, likely from a nosebleed or lip injury caused by dehydration or stress. Frame 25 was blank. Frame 26 showed a blurred shadow passing. Frame 27 was fully black, likely snapped with the camera face down. 27 exposures, a story, a cry for help, a record. It was no longer a question of who had taken her. Now it was. Where had she been kept all these years? Early morning, November 14th, 2023. Inside the investigation unit of the Shakopee Police Department, Detective Amy Warnke spread the entire Madeline Scott case across a large corkboard. At the center, frame 24. Surrounding it, the newly developed photos from the disposable camera, scans of the old calendar, handwritten staff rosters, class photos, and the folded blood-stained card Madeline had once clutched in her lap. Together they were forming a picture, incomplete, but finally taking shape. Forensics confirmed the red stain on the card and dress was human blood, viable for DNA extraction in comparison with Madeline's parents. But what hit harder was what came from the enhanced imagery. In frame 21, the faint reflection in the darkened TV behind Madeline had been clarified. The outline of a man, roughly 5'11", left hand scarred by severe burns, identical to the hand in frame 24. The facial features were blurred, but the posture, the crouch, the lean, all consistent with Paul Gellner, the man arrested in 1982 for attempted child abduction. Amy circled the burn marks in red ink. Below it, pinned on the board, was a photocopy of a 1993 attendance sheet, the one where someone had written in pencil, Mr. Gellner, sub-custodian. That evening, Cynthia Gellner was brought in for a second interview. In interview room 3, the former second-grade teacher sat quietly in a lavender cardigan, her silver hair pinned back with the same gold clip from her 1993 staff photo. Amy placed 2 documents in front of her, a calendar page recovered from the sealed janitor's closet, signed C.R. Gellner, and an employment application written by Paul Gellner using the alias Blaine Carter. Amy didn't waste time. You said you didn't remember who was working that day, but this is your handwriting. Cynthia stared at the paper. Her lips tightened. Amy continued, voice steady. Paul Gellner, born 1954, arrested in Duluth for attempted abduction. He used a fake name to apply through a custodial temp agency. He had access to the school, to your classroom, and that day, October 5th, he was there. Cynthia's voice cracked. He said it was just a job, 1 shift. He said he needed help. I thought, you signed Madeline in on the attendance sheet, Amy said sharply. You let him in. You gave him access, and then she disappeared. Cynthia shook her head. I thought she ran away. I didn't know there was a room. I didn't hide him. Amy leaned in. What did he call her? Cynthia's eyes clouded. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Princess. He called every little girl that, since we were kids. The next day, the forensic team returned to the sealed chamber. Behind a layer of insulation, after peeling back warped foam panels, they discovered a second false wall. A deeper void, using ground radar and a borescope camera they confirmed. A second hidden room. Roughly 6 feet wide, 10 feet long. No doors, no lights, no exits. Inside, they found another pink blanket, nearly identical to the one before, and on the floor, a VHS camcorder with a tape still inside. The label read, Princess Room, Volume 11. The tape was taken to the Minnesota State Forensic Lab, molded and degraded but partially recoverable. In the grainy footage, a child's voice spoke first, weak, trembling. If someone finds this, please tell my mommy I didn't run away. I waited. I didn't stop waiting. Silence. Then footsteps. Then a man's voice. Tomorrow, we start over. Madeline's voice returned, faint and defiant. I wrote my name on the wall. I won't forget. I'm Madeline. I remember my mom. 3:45 p.m., November the 15th, 2023. In Lab Room 2 of the Shakopee Police Department, a forensic imaging technician ran frame 27 through an alternate wavelength scanner. The photo, once believed to be blank, revealed a faint image under infrared light, and it silenced everyone in the room. It wasn't blank at all. A ghostly image emerged, a man's face, pale and unshaven, eyes sunken, his mouth twisted in a crooked smile. He was holding the camera at arm's length as if taking a selfie, and just behind his left shoulder was Madeline, eyes wide open, not in fear, but in recognition. But the man in the photo wasn't Paul Gellner. Amy froze. She stared at the screen, her pulse pounding. "That's not him," Lisa Navarro murmured beside her. "Then we have another suspect." For the first time in 30 years, the investigation acknowledged a new, chilling possibility. Paul hadn't acted alone. The next morning, Amy returned to the Shakopee Community Center, this time with an ultra-high-resolution scan of frame 24. Standing at the very spot where Madeline once sat, she zoomed into the lower right corner of the photo. Barely visible, faded metallic lettering along the edge of the backdrop. She magnified the image. Under filtered light, the inscription became clear. D4S South Observation. It wasn't a school label. It was a facility code, the kind used in mental health institutions or experimental research centers. That night, Lisa scoured Minnesota's defunct health facility archives. One name surfaced: Briarcliff Development Center, a now-shuttered children's behavioral institute, decommissioned in 1991 after allegations of forced isolation therapy and unethical behavioral conditioning. In its blueprint, a small room labeled D4 Observation matched the code on the photo. 4:10 p.m., November 16th, Amy and Lisa arrived at the overgrown remains of the Briarcliff facility, buried deep in the northern Minnesota woods. The gate had rusted shut decades ago, but the building still stood, reclaimed by moss, vines, and silence. Inside, they moved through decaying hallways. Peeling paint curled like skin. Every footstep echoed. The air reeked of mold, rot, and time. Room D1, D2, D3, D4. The door had been welded shut. They pried it open. Inside was the room from frame 24. Foam insulation on the walls, a low ceiling, a fading mural of painted trees. Above, a broken skylight filtered in green light through moss and grime. And on the far wall, where Madeline had once sat, a faint discoloration. Amy crouched. Beneath dust and faded layers she uncovered scratched writing, carved with fingernails. "My name is Madeline. I am real. I am not yours. I remember." And deeper still, gouged into the wall with violent intensity. "They took my voice, but not my name." Lisa knelt beside her. "This wasn't just captivity," she whispered. "This was erasure." Behind the room, a narrow stairwell descended into the sub-basement, an old storage wing. Half the floor had collapsed from rainwater, but beneath the rubble the forensic team uncovered a steel locker, rusted shut and buried under debris. Inside, a battered cassette recorder, a cracked Polaroid camera, and a sealed envelope labeled in shaky handwriting, "To the one who finds her." Amy opened it. The letter was written in unsteady, ink-blotted script. "You found her, didn't you? You saw what I built. She lives in my design. Break the walls, I remain. Only I saw her clearly, and she saw me." At the bottom, one final line. "Frame 28 was mine. Morning of November 17th, 2023. Inside the Shakopee Police Department's high-resolution imaging lab, frame 28 was officially confirmed as the final image captured on Madeline Scott's disposable camera, one that exceeded the standard 27-frame limit. Using expanded spectrum film scanners, the forensics team reconstructed the faint, nearly invisible negative. The photo revealed a man's face, pale, unshaven, a crooked smile stretched across sunken features. He held the camera at arm's length as if taking a selfie. And behind him, Madeline. Her image faint, partially lit from above, but unmistakable. The detail that stunned the team. She was holding the same camera now in evidence, and she had clearly turned it toward him. She took the final shot. An 8-year-old girl had captured her abuser, the last proof of what she saw. At the same time, the investigative team expanded their search into the identity of the man in frame 28. It wasn't Paul Gellner. He wasn't listed in any school staff records. His face didn't match any known state or federal database. But another lead emerged, from the documents and tapes recovered at the Briarcliff facility. A name: Randall Clay. Clay had once worked in logistics and later as a research assistant at Briarcliff in the late 1980s. After the center shut down, he vanished from public records, but surfaced again in 1993 as a character reference for Paul Gellner's temp agency application. In multiple documents, Clay had used the alias Jeremiah Halpern, and under that name, a substitute teacher application had been approved for Jackson Elementary on October 5, 1993. Amy reviewed the group photo from Class 2B that day. No male teacher present, but when she located a former student, Daniel Meyer, now a high school science teacher, he confirmed something chilling. That morning, it was Ms. Gellner, but after recess, there was a man. Tall, skinny, quiet. He just stood there, like he was taking mental notes. Amy asked, "Did he speak to Madeline?" Daniel paused. "Yeah." He bent down and whispered something. After that, she stopped talking. Even during Heads Up 7-Up, she didn't play. She just stared at the door. Later that afternoon, Lisa Navarro called in from Minneapolis. "I found the license records. Jeremiah Halpern's teaching ID, forged. The photo on file matches Randall Clay with 96% confidence, and he wasn't incarcerated in 1993. Amy stared at frame 28. Madeline wasn't just looking at the camera. She was looking through it, as if trying to preserve a face she knew no one would believe. So she captured it. That evening, police executed a search warrant on an abandoned trailer at the edge of Silver Bay, last known address of Randall Clay. Though the property had been deserted since 1996, remnants of its past remained. In the decaying bedroom, officers found a bolted steel floor safe. Inside, a handwritten file titled Princess Protocol, Phase 2, a photograph of Madeline in her yellow dress, smiling, but unnaturally so. A forged adoption certificate naming Randall Clay, alias Gregory Baines, as her legal guardian. The first page of Princess Protocol contained entries such as, "Daily affirmation. I am not Madeline. I am Princess. Silent dinner. Reward for obedience. Erase external identity. Install new schema." Phase 2 begins when she forgets the name Anne. At the bottom, circled in red ink, she still remembers her mother. Begin sleep deprivation. Remove mirrors. Reinforce false memory. Beneath that, a final line, jagged and scrawled, "I am father. No one else." Madeline had not only been locked behind walls of cement and insulation, she had been trapped behind language, fabricated memory, a stolen name, and for 30 years she had fought back the only way she could, by carving her real name into every wall she could reach. Morning of November 20th, 2023, Minnesota State Police received a delayed report from a ranger named Jerry Hayes, stationed near the Itasca State Forest Reserve. Nearly a month prior, Hayes had encountered a lone woman wandering near Trail 14, a remote path 7 miles from the nearest road. She didn't ask for help. She asked only one question. "Are the rooms still there?" Hayes, confused, had answered that everything had been torn down long ago. The woman simply nodded, turned, and walked silently back into the forest. At the time, he hadn't filed a report, assuming she was mentally unwell or lost. But after seeing frame 28 on the news, Hayes picked up the phone. "I think it was her," he said. 1:30 p.m. that same day, an investigative team from the Shakopee and St. Paul police departments followed Hayes's directions into the woods. Leading the search were Amy Warnke and Lisa Navarro. Along Trail 14, they discovered small, irregular footprints, spaced unevenly, like someone walking in exhaustion or disorientation. broken branches, flattened grass. At the end of the trail, they found an old cabin, unmarked on any map. Its roof sagged. Moss blanketed its walls. Windows were boarded from the inside, but the front door stood out, freshly painted a vivid red, not chipped, not faded, new. Amy drew her weapon. Minnesota State Police. If someone's inside, announce yourself. Silence. Lisa stepped forward and pushed the door gently. It opened, unlocked. 10:28 a.m. And they entered the cabin. The interior was eerily still. Light filtered through broken slats. Dust floated in the stale air. The walls were lined with children's drawings and photographs, crude stick figures, Polaroids, copied yearbook pages. There were images of Madeline, age 8, in her yellow dress, holding a folded card that read, "For Daddy." In the back room, they found a wooden bed, frame splintered, covered in rotting blankets. On it, a decomposed male body, the head partially burned, face unrecognizable. But his left hand bore familiar scars, identical to those in frame 24. Lisa covered her mouth, backing away. That's him. Clay. But Amy wasn't convinced, because in the corner of the room, on the wooden floor, someone was sitting. She was curled inward, knees to chest, long dark hair streaked with silver, thin, pale. Face turned to the window. When Amy approached, the woman slowly lifted her head. Madeline Scott. No DNA test needed. No ID required. The eyes hadn't changed in 30 years. Madeline, Amy whispered. The woman didn't speak. Tears filled her eyes but didn't fall. Lisa knelt beside her with a blanket. We're here to take you home. You're safe now. Madeline didn't react. She kept staring at the wall, at a cracked mirror propped sideways. And in its reflection they saw not just her, but frame 28. The man's face, the twisted smile, the empty eyes. He's dead, Lisa murmured. Madeline spoke. Her first words. No, he never dies. He's here. She tapped her temple. Inside, behind the red door. 2:10 p.m., St. Paul Medical Center. Madeline Scott was admitted in critical but stable condition. Severe malnutrition, chronic insomnia, deep psychological trauma. But she was alert. Her vitals held. She was alive. Wrapped tightly in cloth, she clutched an old Polaroid camera. One final undeveloped frame inside. Frame 29. When developed, the image revealed a red door, closed tight, and scratched into its paint. Over and over by fingernails. One word. Enough. Madeline Scott, missing since October 5, 1993, had been found. Not beneath floorboards, not behind concrete, but alive and still carrying every memory. Spring 2024. The field outside what was once Jackson Elementary, now transformed into the Shakopee Children's Recovery Center, bloomed with tulips in shades of red and violet. On the front wall of the newly built wing, where Room 2B had stood 30 years ago, hung a black and white photo. Frame 24. Unedited, uncropped, preserved. Madeline Scott sat upright, her hair softly curled, eyes wide, lips parted. Beneath the photo, a small plaque read, "In memory of those who were lost and those who were found. Too late, but still." At the intensive psychiatric wing of St. Paul Medical Center, Madeline Scott, now 39 years old, didn't speak often, but she drew. Page after page, hands pressed against walls, a child sitting beside a mirror, locked doors. One phrase repeated, "She saw me when I wasn't real." Her therapist let her listen to music now, mostly lullabies. One afternoon, with sunlight warming the windowsill, Madeline turned and asked quietly, "Do they still take school pictures?" "Yes," the therapist smiled. "Every year." Madeline nodded and whispered, "When I was little, I thought cameras were traps, fake eyes that froze you." She tapped her drawing. "But sometimes, they keep you alive." In Minneapolis, Lisa Navarro kept a copy of Frame 28 in her personal file, not out of obsession, but remembrance. The man in the image remained unidentified, but behind him, blurred and faint, Madeline, still looking back. Sometimes Lisa lectured at the State University. Her course was titled, How Children Disappear Without Moving. It was always standing room only. At the Shakopee Police Department, Detective Amy Warnke closed the case file labeled 93-1005. The last time she saw Madeline was in the hospital hallway, light pouring through the glass, catching in the survivor's eyes. Amy didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. Madeline had survived, not because they got there in time. Not because anyone was clever. She survived because she never forgot who she was, even when everyone and everything tried to erase her. That isn't just survival, that's resistance. In the sealed evidence vault of the St. Louis County Forensic Lab, the original roll of Madeline's Polaroid film still rests, unprocessed to the final frame. Frame 30. No one's sure if they even want to develop it, because if frame 29 was the red door, then frame 30 might be what was waiting behind it. And some truths are meant to stay in the dark.